And that's kind of what we're getting better and better at, is just predicting what you intend to do after a meeting. And rather than you dropping the ball or forgetting a follow-up, or not able to kind of communicate something with your team right away, we're able to kind of alleviate that cognitive bandwidth that you would spend on kind of figuring those things out, and just kind of serve them up for you.
Hey, welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, the first global community connecting top-tier independent management consultants with one another. We just heard from today's guest, Avish Bhama, the CEO of Sonia, that's spelled Sonia, where their mission is to build artificial intelligence that interprets human intent and use it to democratize access to information flow at work. Sonia builds tools that empower you to focus on the interesting and creative nature of your work rather than the repetitive and mundane parts. And when you sign up for a plan with Sonia, you get an AI tool that can dial into your phone calls, take notes, identify the action items that are agreed to in the meeting, and then send an email afterward to the participants telling them what they agreed to do. While this sounds a bit sci-fi, it seems that it won't be long before this sort of AI involvement in our work will be the norm. And you can learn more about Sonia at Sonia.ai. Hello, Avish. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Will.
So let's talk about Sonia. Give me the overview.
Sure. So, Sonia is a company that we started about 2 years ago. And it was actually born out of a previous startup that I was working on, where we had hired some Bridgewater folks that joined our team and told us that we were the most disorganized company that they had ever worked at. And they got us in the habit of recording meetings, and they're kind of notorious for recording meetings over at Bridgewater. And so we got into the habit of recording meetings, and one of our engineers actually created a way to search the audio content of these meetings. And that's kind of where Sonia started. And what we do is we've built a way to dial into conference calls and extract things like the audio content. And now we're working on some pretty interesting machine learning that's able to predict human intent during a conversation and autocomplete tasks. So if you were to be on a conference call and say something like, hey, as a follow-up, I will email you the marketing materials and I'll introduce you to my friend Bill. What Sonia does is it understands that there's keywords and key phrases that are said to express intent. And what we do then is predict action items during a meeting. And then we can also auto-complete tasks after a meeting to kind of save users time as they are going through meetings.
That's very cool. So this actually came out of something that you built for yourself.
Yeah, totally. We actually were building it and using it for one of our prior companies that I was working on, and it was used amongst both our engineering team and our sales team at that company.
That's very cool. So a few questions around this. So first, just a very practical thing, like dialing in Sonia. So let's say that I want to, call a contact. Let's say Sarah. So I want to call Sarah and have a conversation. Let's say Sarah's a client. Now, does it have to be kind of a conference call, like a dial-in, or do I kind of like call Sonia and then use my iPhone to kind of conference in somebody? So how does the practical thing work of getting Sonia on the phone?
Yeah, so we actually sit on top of conference calling providers. So whether it's Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or Uber Conference or any sort of a third-party bridge or dial-in with a pin that you might have on your calendar, what we do is we parse the events on your calendar and can dial into the calls that you already automatically have on your calendar. And then we also offer a bridge number on our web app, which is at Sonia.com. And so we sit on top of the kind of the conference call provider layer, and any call that you have, we are able to dial into it and extract the audio of it. So we store a recording for you. And then we'll also be able to summarize the meeting, where we use a machine transcription service to transcribe the meeting using voice to text technology. And then we also can extract the action items using keywords and key phrases that are said during a conference call. So it gets it's most accurate where there are kind of two callers on a call talking directly with one another, and it gets less and less accurate where there's multiple speakers, or if people are on speakerphone, or there's ambient noise in the background, or people are talking over one another. But the general idea is for us to kind of create the ability to sync with your calendar and automatically dial into meetings, and then kind of email you the meeting notes after the meeting is done, for you to be able to kind of review them, edit them, and circulate them amongst your team.
Wow, that's very cool. So just in terms of the practical piece of dialing in, once you get it all kind of set up, let's say that you regularly use Zoom, then you wouldn't even have to do anything in particular. It just sort of by default, Sonia is going to dial into any Zoom meeting you have on your calendar.
That's right. And you can edit your preferences on which calls you want Sonia to dial into, and which calls you don't want it to dial into.
That's very cool. Okay. And then after the meeting, I would get an email that said, boom, here's the transcript of the whole discussion. And up top or something, it says, and here's some action items that, for you, action items for the other person. And then, so you get that. And then how does so let me just first, is that kind of what happens?
Yeah. So after the meeting is done, what we do is we actually use a machine transcription service that goes in and transcribes the meeting. And that's all kind of using a speech to text recognition engine that is able to take that speech and convert it to text in real time. And so that's usually available between 5 and 10 minutes after the meeting is done. And what we're now doing is, based off of certain keywords and key phrases that are said during that meeting, we not only have the recording and the machine transcript of the meeting available, but we also can predict action items. So after a meeting, what happens is you get a recording, a transcription, and then kind of the predicted action items of that specific meeting, where we're able to say, hey, Will, you just had this call. Here's, the 12 action items that came out of this meeting. And what we're kind of working on is getting more and more accurate at understanding what the human intent is during a meeting, to help auto-complete tasks after a meeting is done.
Yeah, I can see how this would be very helpful. I mean, even just the transcription would be pretty handy if you're a consultant doing interviews, let's say, of some experts. So that would be handy by itself. And then the action items, super helpful if, kind of just reminding you what each person agreed to. How does the kind of auto-complete part work? So if you say, okay, I'll send you my one pager on that, or the other person says, okay, well, I'll send you a contract. Does it, at this point, kind of draft an email or something that's, has the one pager attached, and, it says like, hey, as we agreed on the call, here's the one pager. Does it give me a chance to review and approve it before it sends it off? How does that all work?
What we're working on right now is kind of a set of actions that users might do after a meeting is done. So a set of actions might include things like sending an email, or sending out a calendar invite, or updating a CRM, or sharing something with your team on Slack in regards to the meeting that just happened. And so the types of integrations that are required to do these things are things like Gmail, Outlook for sending an email, maybe Slack or Microsoft Teams for sharing meeting content or meeting notes with your team, and maybe Salesforce or Asana if you wanted to update a CRM. And so if you were to be on a call and say something like, hey, as a follow-up, I will send over the draft of the update that we're working on, or whatever it is. What we do is we are able to classify that as the user wants to send an email. And so obviously we can't go in and predict the type of email that you want to send. But what we are able to do is we're able to kind of serve up a draft templated email that you had intended to send. And after the meeting, we might say, hey, Will, you just had this call with Avish. Here's the recording. Here's the transcription. And here's the 7 action items that came out of this meeting. And here's the 4 draft emails that you should take a look at to review them here and click this to send. And so you can kind of review those types of drafts and send them out. And it's similar to the way that, I don't know if you use Gmail, but Gmail is kind of able to auto-complete your sentences now based off of your speech and text patterns that you've developed over time. And that's kind of what we're getting better and better at, is just predicting what you intend to do after a meeting. And rather than you dropping the ball or forgetting a follow-up or not able to kind of communicate something with your team right away, we're able to kind of alleviate that cognitive bandwidth that you would spend on kind of figuring those things out and just kind of serve them up for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell me a little bit about the kinds of professionals that are using your tool today and how they're using it.
Yeah, so most of our users, right now we have about 2,000 users, about 900 companies on our platform. And most of the users that we have on our platform are management consultants. We have a number of users that are in the enterprise sales industry, where they're kind of selling enterprise software of some degree. And then we have a number of users that are in other industries, other remote industries. Usually teams that are using Sonia are collaborating in some way where they want to share meeting content with one another at an org. So as you can imagine, if you're at a company and you are interested in, going to a meeting where, let's say, you're double booked, you might want to read the meeting notes of this meeting after a meeting if you weren't able to attend. Conversely, let's say your entire schedule is just filled with meetings, and then you have meetings about other meetings. This is easy for you to be able to kind of upload and download information and kind of transfer it to another team member seamlessly. So we work with a lot of remote teams, a lot of consulting groups, and a lot of sales professionals.
Amazing. I can certainly see how this would be, a useful tool for particularly an independent consultant where you maybe don't have an executive assistant or a more junior team member who can sit on the call and take notes. So, when I started consulting, it was sort of the typical thing where you'd have 2 people on a call, one to lead the call and one to take notes, and this to some degree can substitute for that second person. Tell me a little bit about the kind of pricing model that you have for people that would be interested to try the tool.
Yeah, so right now we're kind of in beta testing mode, and we've given this out for a select group of users that are kind of giving us regular feedback on the product every day. And so now we have a 3-month free trial where after 3 months is up, we are pricing the product in a tiered way, anywhere from $50 to $150 per seat per month. And that's based off of the types of things that Sonia is able to do for you. And, for obviously the upper tier, if we're auto-completing tasks, it's almost akin to having a personal assistant that is able to kind of save you 8-10 hours a week of follow-up time. And then if we are, just used for, people that are reading meeting content, we have a free version available. So we kind of start everyone off at a free trial, and it's a freemium business the way that our software works.
Cool. And where would people go to sign up for that free trial?
It's at Sonia.com, Sonia.com.
Fantastic. And what? Tell me a little bit. I mean, one thing that a lot of people might ask is around security. So tell me how you address that.
Yeah, so we work primarily with AWS, and that's where we store all of our meeting data. and it's all encrypted and it's all fully controlled by the end user. So if the end user wants to delete their data, it's fully in control of them being able to log in and do so. And it's similar to the way that we would kind of handle emails. It's all kind of fully managed by AWS and in control of the end user being able to do so.
And what about getting the sort of permission of the other person? So some states you can record a phone call, I believe, with only one person consent. Some states require two-person consent. So does Sonia get announced on the call, like this call is being recorded, or how do you typically address that?
Yeah, good question. So there's one-party states and two-party consent states. In two-party consent states, both parties are required to consent for the call to be recorded. And so what we've done is we've designed Sonia to announce that at the beginning of each call, it is able to dial into that meeting, and it announces that it's going to be on the call recording that meeting and storing a record of the meeting separately. And if and the user is kind of in control of whether that announcement is on or off. If that announcement is off, the onus of responsibility for the user to let the meeting participants know that the call is being recorded is actually on the user. Mm-hmm. So we kind of the way we deal with it in the product is we have built an announcement. It's a quick 3 or 4 second announcement at the beginning of each meeting, and it's kind of easily controlled by the user.
Fantastic. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, Avish, kind of about some of the previous startups that you were involved in before Sonia, and how you got to the point where you're leading this company.
Sure. Yeah. So, my background is predominantly in startups. I've been working on startups for more than a decade now. And my first company was actually in the cryptocurrency space. And so we were amongst the very first people to start a Bitcoin exchange way back in 2011 when Bitcoin was very, very difficult to trade. And during that time, we had actually recruited a few Bridgewater folks, one of which that invested in the company, and then one of which actually joined our team. And when he joined our team, he had kind of got us into the habit of recording all of our meetings, as I mentioned, and exceptionally smart guy. And we had kind of passively started building a habit of just recording meetings and being able to kind of have a central system of record for what is happening at our company, so that if anybody has any questions, we could share that content with folks internally. So as an example, if somebody's having a conversation with a client and on the sales team, and engineering is curious to understand what the pain points are that the client is bringing up with the product, that's all kind of centrally stored. And so what we ended up working on was a way to not only store the meeting, but to also search the content of the meeting through searching the audio, and then summarize that meeting so that somebody doesn't have to go in and read an entire transcript or listen to an entire hour-long meeting. And that's where a lot of our machine learning came in. So we had started working on this years ago, and it had kind of become the most useful thing that we had built internally. And so as we were kind of thinking about this pain point that we were solving for ourselves, we kind of thought, all right, this is pretty compelling, and this is going to be a company in and of itself. And that's kind of when we started working on Sonia back in 2017.
I'm curious to hear, beyond Sonia, what other kind of personal productivity kind of habits do you have that have helped you get things done? It seems like someone who would be involved in building this company and this tool would have figured out some smart ways to be more efficient.
I'm actually the opposite. I was a very disorganized manager, and I was a first-time entrepreneur when I had started that first company, and I was not good at organizing notes or taking minutes of meetings, or I stored a lot of information in my head. And so what happened was people kept wanting to meet with me to get a download of what I was thinking. And I had to kind of work on my communication skills and work on kind of extracting what was in my brain onto, a central wiki for the entire team to benefit from it. And so this had kind of been born out of a pain that I had myself, where the pain wasn't necessarily for me directly, but it was for other people around me that didn't have the same, knowledge base. And conversely, similarly, when they were in meetings, I wasn't privy to, I also didn't have the same knowledge base that they had. In terms of, tools that I use today, I obviously use Sonia, I use Asana, we use HubSpot to kind of manage our sales process, and I'm kind of an avid note taker now on my phone, where I'm kind of jotting things down regularly when I have an idea pop up in my head, and or something that I want to talk about in a conversation with somebody.
And what do you use for that? Use Evernote or some other tool?
I currently just email things to myself. So I use the Notes app on iPhone, and then I'll kind of screenshot it and email it to myself.
Okay. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
That's one where I love Evernote for that kind of purpose. It's amazing, as you probably know. I'm curious, just to backtrack a little bit, what led you to create a Bitcoin exchange in 2011? That's pretty early days. Someone who bought some Bitcoins then and held them till today would probably be doing pretty well. And so that was pretty early on. What got you kind of aware of the whole cryptocurrency field and wanting to dedicate yourself to building a startup in that space?
Sure. Yeah. I had actually joined Apple on their foreign exchange team in 2010. And in 2011, I, got interested in not only foreign exchange, but cryptocurrency at that time. And I had actually met Brian Armstrong, who was working on what became Coinbase, but he was working on an app called BitBank at the time. And I had met him a few times, and he actually is the first person to tell me about Bitcoin and explain it to me in depth. And when he did, I got really interested in trading it. And he was working on a wallet app. And but back in 2011, it was so illiquid, it was very difficult to trade. And so during that time, the trading and the exchange landscape was so fragmented and illiquid that it made sense to actually build something to connect liquidity and pools of liquidity through an exchange. And so we had started working on that in 2011. And it was relatively early back then, but obviously things have come a long way since then.
Sure have. On Sonia, what do you see kind of as the developments over the next couple years for tools like yours? You can now do kind of the speech recognition and figure out what the action items are. What do you see on the horizon over the next couple of years of things that we can expect tools like Sonia will be able to do for us?
The big kind of predominant theme that we're actually working on is workflow automation. And what that means is, right now, every day you have tools that you use, you have people that you interact with, you are, constantly perhaps in meetings, and the output of the meetings require you to do many follow-ups. In workflow automation, what we're working on is for the human to be able to expend less energy doing things like repetitive, manual, tedious tasks, and for them to be able to, create a way for those types of things to be automated so that you can spend more of your day and more of your time working on the more creative work that you do on a regular basis. And so kind of if you look at my work day, I spend a lot of time in meetings. We have to update things like, a CRM so that I can kind of share meeting notes across organizations and across kind of teams and functions at my company. And then, updating things like Salesforce or HubSpot or doing follow-up emails. A lot of those will get dropped if you're not kind of on the ball. So what we're working on is ways to kind of automate that over a period of time where you show up to work and it'll say, hey, Will, yesterday you just had 8 calls. Here are the 12 follow-ups that came out of these 8 calls. And here's, 5 draft emails that you have to send out today. Please click here to review and click here to send. And it's able to kind of be a co-pilot for you at work, where it's able to automate the things that you tediously have to do right now, so that you can kind of spend more of your time doing more creative things at work.
Well, so you're taking off my plate all the stuff that I'm comfortable doing and I know how to do. And it sounds like you're going to be freeing up more of my calendar for the hard stuff. That's a good thing.
Yeah, this is going to be a major wave kind of over the coming decade. And a lot of machine learning and a lot of AI that's being built is kind of being built in a way that helps alleviate human beings from needing to do tedious things at work. So that's kind of the things that we're working on. And it's going to be a long road, but that's the output of the work.
Fantastic. Well, Avish, this sounds like a really cool tool and I encourage listeners to check it out. Sonia.com, Sonia.com. Get a 3-month free trial. Avish, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Will. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.